Hi there, I've come now to the end of week 3 of this project and I've now completely recovered the roof and re-battened it. Not as much progress as I would have liked, but actually lost a few days here and there for various reasons I won't bore you with, so it's probably just over 2 and a bit weeks worth of work. Next week will be all about the tiling, so I thought I'd do a quick update video this weekend just to update you on a few things I've learned, a few mistakes I've made, which I think will be useful for any of you out there who are thinking of undertaking your own DIY re-roofing project. And before I start, I want to extend a huge amount of thanks to everyone out there who's commented after my first few videos. This sort of project is the sweet spot for me in terms of doing something that I really enjoy doing, but also having encouragement and advice, hints and tips fed in by you guys after each video. It's just, you can't get much better than that. And it reminds me of a quote that Mark left when he said, "There's light at the end of the tunnel now, Charlie," or actually, you're so far into the tunnel, you're not afraid of the dark anymore. And I really do feel like that on this project. First thing to talk about, I had a bit of an accident after filming the last video. I was sat on a wooden chair on this tower and on the other side of the roof. And I stepped down off the tower onto the chair. After filming, the chair collapsed and I smashed my head into the railing on the side of the tower. So I decided at that point, I've been eyeing these things up for ages. I decided it was about time I bought a professional work platform, and I bought this one from Wix. I know you're not meant to put these on towers, but lashed down it'll be all right, and it's a lot safer than stepping down gingerly off the roof onto the tower as I have been doing. These little work platforms are so useful for painting all sorts of jobs, and I recommend you getting one. Now, whilst on the subject of tool innovations, you might remember me saying in week 2 that Paslode gas nailer that I hired from a local hire-it store in Kidderminster was driving me crazy. I was losing so many valuable hours of work with this thing misfiring. I took it back on Monday after doing the video. They gave me a couple of new gas canisters. Obviously it worked fine in the shop. Got it home and it started misfiring almost immediately. I was so angry about this that there and then on the roof I got my phone out and ordered this Hikoki NR1890 DC nailer. It come well recommended to me by people like Robin Clevitt, Keith from Rag and Bone Brown, and also Andy Mack of Gosforth Handyman. Not to mention loads of you out there. I've loved using this nailer all week. It just hasn't missed a beat. I did a quick 1-minute review on my Instagram channel earlier on in the week, and do follow me on Instagram if you have a chance. I'm putting a lot more time into that now. But suffice to say, it's a little bit heavier than the Paslode. I weighed it at the Paslode at 4.5 kilograms, the Hikoki at 6, including its battery. But to be honest with you, this weight difference doesn't make any odds to me. And actually, when you've got them both in your hands, it doesn't feel a lot of difference between the two. And I certainly haven't found the weight a problem whilst using it on the roof. It comes with 2 5Ah batteries, which disappointingly don't have a battery charge status indicator on them, which are the only 5Ah batteries I own which don't. Although I guess all of you out there would say it doesn't matter because you've got a status indicator on the nail gun itself. And as it ships with 2 5Ah batteries, it also has this fan cooled charger. Although what's I think quite unhelpful about it is when the battery's charged, the status light blinks red rather than green. And it takes the same nails as I was using on the Paslode. I've since bought another 2,000 nails without gas from Tooled Up, thinking I was going to run out, but annoyingly I haven't run out. Oh well. The only thing I would say is I really wish I'd bought this Hikoki 18-volt nailer before the start of the project, because I ended up having to pay the hire company 100 quid for a week's hire. They let me off the second week. It was £35 plus VAT a week. That 100 quid did admittedly include 2 boxes of nails with those gas canisters, but that's money I would have obviously saved if I'd bought the nailer in the first place. Other fun discoveries this week: I've reignited my love for the Humble tool belt. I didn't used to like wearing these things because I found them a bit claustrophobic around my waist, but I was jumping up and down off the roof so often and losing so many pencils, I decided enough was enough. Went into my tool store and pulled out this old forged steel tool belt. So, you know, not the best in the market, but it's been an absolute revelation. If you're planning a project like this, I can't recommend you getting a tool belt highly enough. And just basic things like running, every time I ran out of a cartridge of nails for the nail gun, I had to go down off the roof to get another one. This way with the tool belt, I had about 3 cartridges in the tool belt at any one time, as well as staple guns, scissors, Leatherman penknife, you name it. Now, I mentioned the trend miter saw last week. This has been completely replaced now by my little circular saw. I just found the circular saw so useful, so versatile, both in terms of cutting the battens on the roof, but also cutting them on the ground. And if you combine the circular saw with a rafter square like you see me doing here, you can create perfect 90-degree cuts, whether you've got it on a workbench or you're standing up with it. It's safe, easy to use. I love this circular saw. You might have seen my previous videos extolling its virtues. A couple of other fun things to mention to you. Terry, a roofer from Leamington and the man behind Big Softy, got in touch following a few posts I'd done on Instagram and offered to send me these strapless knee pads and this ladder pad. Now the ladder pad will come in very handy, particularly when I start tiling the roof. But the strapless knee pads have been a bit of a revelation too. They're not paying me anything, by the way, to mention them in this vid. I just like mentioning fun, cool things that actually change the way you do your DIY. And these knee pads, because they're strapless, were so fantastic. I even forgot I was wearing them later on in the day when I was doing things like cutting down the batten for the ridge tiles. And after seriously putting them through their paces on the roof, I did have a little bit of a glitch with one of the plastic straps breaking, which I improvised a repair on with some electrical wire. But compared to the DIYte knee pads I've used up till now, and which I've also had to repair, they're a great innovation you should keep your eye on. Now let's talk about a few of the mistakes I've made this week. A lot of you have kindly pointed out that if I'd started stripping the roof on the north side from the top rather than the bottom, I wouldn't have had the problem with all of those spalled tiles of disintegrated bits falling down the roof onto my freshly laid roofing felt and battens. Now this is blindingly obvious to me now, but it wasn't at the time when I started stripping the roof, and obviously it seemed to me to make sense when I was standing on the tower to start at the bottom. So if you're planning a project like this, start at the top. Now it is a little bit more difficult because obviously you're removing a large tract of battens which you then can't use to support yourself, and I did nearly fall into the garage when I leant on a bit of the bitumastic roof felt that then tore and nearly sent me tumbling inside. Another mistake I've made, DIYte recommend that you leave a bit of a sag between each batten. I've got one row of roofing felt here which is a little bit too taut. One of the hardest things of doing this as a one-man job is laying your roof felt, getting the tension correct on it. So this is one bit of roofing felt that hasn't been my finest hour, but what I am going to do is get these little battens and slip them underneath and glue them in place so that I've then got the channel. The idea of this is that you want the moisture, any moisture that goes underneath the tiles, to run safely down the dip rather than get anywhere near the nails and battens on the joists, on the rafters. So that was a bit of an error. I didn't mention last week that the way I've fastened the roofing felt in position each time is to use my little staple gun. Just stapling in some, I think they're 10mm galvanized nails, galvanized staples. And the beauty of using a staple gun like this is you can staple the felt at one end before you start unraveling it. And the best thing to do is to staple it underneath the lap, the overlap for the bit of felt that's above it. Again, when I started this project, I was stapling it everywhere, and of course in some areas you're compromising the watertight membrane by doing that. But by just putting a couple of staples in, you can then unravel the whole, in this case 8-meter run of felt, and then reposition it in a couple of places before positioning the battens on top. I've found this way you can be really economical. You probably only need to use 4 or 5, 6 staples for each run of the felt, and it was just a really easy way to get it in position before nailing the battens in place. Other things to talk about, I've had to cut down the ridge batten right at the top. I'm basically copying what the roofers did originally, and the reason you have this is so that you've got a ridge tile at the top to ensure that all-important overlap, just like you have down at the eaves. There's a dash line on this DIYte Super Pro membrane so that you can easily get your 150mm lap correct, the overlap between each piece of underfelt as you go down the roof. DIYte recommends sealing each sheet together with acrylic tape. Their more expensive underfelt actually comes with this tape incorporated. Again, I haven't done this on this project. I'll be interested to know how many of you out there, particularly roofers, go to the trouble of doing this on each of your jobs. But what I have done is bought some of the DIYte double-sided tape, which I'll be using to stick down the underfelt to the eave support tray for a watertight seal. As I got over the ridge at the top, I doubled over the felt on each side by 150mm, which gives you a total overlap of 300mm between the underfelt on one side and the corresponding underfelt on the next. Not sure how necessary this is, but again, DIYte recommend it in their installation guide. Brilliant suggestion from Harriet Handyman last week. Again, this is why I just love all the comments that you give me on these projects, because it just fills me with advice and inspiration. But I explained the problem I had last week with the Eave support tray and the last two battens being slap bang down onto it, preventing any moisture getting out and therefore potentially rotting the battens. Harriet Handyman recommended I install glazing packers underneath those bottom two battens, just to give a little bit of a conduit for all that any of that moisture to come out. And that's exactly what I've done, and I'm hoping that will prevent the catastrophic failure, the rotting of the last two battens down by the eaves as the roof was previously designed. I've had to dismantle the plastic greenhouse roof that I screwed on several years ago, but I had to do this to get a tower into the greenhouse, because you've got to have as much tower support as possible when you're doing a job like this. You can't re-roof from ladders alone, even though this garage is only 1 story high. When I took the greenhouse roof off, I also removed this sort of avalanche snow guard. I love jobs like this because you can really get under the skin and into the thinking of the person who owned the house before you. The greenhouse was obviously the previous owner's pride and joy, and he got this, I can only describe it as a sort of avalanche guard made to protect his greenhouse roof. I just love that. I think it's fantastic. Partly because I've got the plastic roof now, and partly because we haven't had a lot of snow over the last few years. I'm going to remove this now. I don't think it's necessary going forward. But what an ingenious little solution to a problem that he had at the time. And that's really it for this week. Next week I will be progressing with the tiling, so hopefully we'll be back to sort of 1 final video, or possibly 2, to show you the tiling job through to completion. And a little bit of a sneak peek here on another small mini video series that's going to come up after this. One of the reasons that I'm re-tiling this roof, I mean, it was a really good job I did because so many of the tiles were disintegrating, is because I plan to install solar panels on this south face. So I'm currently trying to work out how to get this hook stop system to work with the brackets I've been given. I'm scratching my head because, as with so many things, it simply doesn't work as designed, because when you put the tiles on top, they're raised up from the roof. Anyway, that's a problem for me to sort out, and I'll be telling you more about that next time. But to ensure I allowed enough space for these hooks, you will have seen me using these blocks to space every batten 58mm apart. Can't thank you enough for watching this video in these surreal, financially crunched times that we find ourselves in at the moment. Massively grateful for your support. Don't forget, everything I've talked about today will be in the description below the video, which you can access on your smartphone by clicking on the little arrow, and on your PC by clicking on the show more button. And finally, as I always say, if you're new to my channel, it would mean so much to me to have you subscribe. You can do that by clicking on the link here, and don't forget to click the bell notification icon so you get notified of all my future uploads. See you soon.